When it's time to clutch up and deliver a legacy-defining performance, there's very few athletes in the world that possess that big game gene. That's something within them that when the lights are shining the brightest, the stakes are at an all-time high, they go out there with ice in their veins, and a short while later, once the clock strikes zero, you turn off the TV or you leave the arena, what they did is top of mind. Those Showtime type guys that don't just meet pressure head on, but relish every single moment, saving their best for the grandest stage. WWE wise, it doesn't get any bigger than WrestleMania, and to be the guy year in, year out who makes that their playground with the tagline of Mr.Wrestlemania is the ultimate honor. A title that belongs to the Heartbreak Kid himself, Shawn Michaels. I know off the hop, people are probably asking the question, how can you be Mr. Wrestlemania if you have a losing record? At the core of it, yeah, wins and losses matter, but in wrestling, there's more criteria that define someone's legacy. It's the stories told, the breathtaking moments created, the competitor's flair for the dramatic and ability to perform in heightened situations, then of course match quality and range. That last part is something that hits you square in the chin when you look at HBK's resume from top to bottom. Ladder matches, retirement matches, Iron Man matches, championship matches, no holds barred matches, triple threat matches, dream matches. At one point, even as a referee, Shawn was cementing another chapter into his WrestleMania story. Everything started when a 24-year-old moonwalking HBK walked into WrestleMania 5 with partner Marty Jannetty to take on the Twin Towers. The first few years were pretty inconsequential, even though all the performances are strong. After opening the show at both WrestleMania 8 and 9 against Tito Santana and Tatanka came the first classic, a match with historical significance. WrestleMania 10 against Razor Ramon. The first ladder match WWF put on pay-per-view. Now, think about the tall task that is. On the biggest night of the year, you have to go out there and make a never-before-seen match type work, and to add to that, the location is Madison Square Garden. When you look at WWE's lure on some of these matches, we know how they operate. There's certain bouts they push the quality and importance of more than they should to create their own narrative. This doesn't fall into that category, and it's truly a masterpiece. What happened was Shawn Michaels ended up getting suspended for a steroid violation, even though he claims that at his lowest, roids were something he never turned to. Because of this, he had to forfeit the Intercontinental Championship, and since he couldn't defend it within 30 days, the title was put up for grabs. Razor won it, but when HBK popped back up, the title was still around his waist. The simple solution was both championships would be suspended above the ring, and the winner would become undisputed Intercontinental Champion. See, in modern ladder matches, there's a lot more luxury the competitors are afforded. They can do the ladder burial spot, the ladder bridge, the rung break. They have multiple at their disposal to be creative and do more, but this one only had one. Only one ladder was available, and that amplified the importance of it way more. As far as ladder matches go, of course there have been better ones, but you have to put yourself back in these times. They were doing a lot of heavy hitting, and if not for this one, the innovations that came later are non-existent. The big snapshot moment is when Shawn hits a splash from up high. Regardless of that, both guys wine and dine at a punishment buffet, and this is something you truly have to sit down and watch for yourself to appreciate. You're gonna hear me say that a lot throughout this video. Shawn was tied up in the ropes and had to look up at Ramon unhooking the titles and taking it all. That, ladies and gentlemen, was the first time Mr. WrestleMania stole the show. The next year, he took on his former bodyguard in a story of the monster outgrowing the guy he was protecting. On a terrible WrestleMania 11, this was a bright spot. After this came the 1-hour Iron Man match against Bret Hart at WrestleMania 12, and this one has a spectrum. Either you love it or you hate it. One side sees it as nothing more than an overrated match that had far too many rest holds and 0 falls at the end of 60. The other side will tell you that none of these guys having a fall is what added to the drama. It was a stylistic masterpiece that the former just won't understand. A slow escalation to the ultimate crowning moment and multiple matches inside of the hour plus overtime. The night HBK ziplined down to the ring was also when the boyhood dream came true. After winning the Rumble, Shawn won his first world championship. Just like the ladder match earlier, this one holds significance in that it's the first Iron Man match on pay-per-view for the company, a friendly rivalry that was so big between two in-ring technicians that it could only go down with a stipulation that pushed their limits. The next year, the rumor is that it was supposed to be these two running it back, but this time Bret was supposed to win. Months beforehand, Shawn came out, told everyone that he had lost his smile, vacated the title because of a quote-unquote career-threatening injury before returning to the ring just 3 months later. Michaels said doctors told him that the knee ailment was significant enough that it could end his career, while Bret thought that Shawn just didn't want to do the job. When you look at the greatness of this resume, the first half here is good, but when that second peak arrives is when things go into overdrive. In the main event of WrestleMania 14, it was time for Stone Cold to get his crowning moment. He won the 98 Rumble, while at the same show in a match against The Undertaker, Shawn clipped his back on a casket, herniating discs in his back. At this time, Shawn was in an awful place physically and mentally, and the decision was made that he wouldn't wrestle until the main event. On the flip side, the odds were being stacked against Austin, with Mike Tyson on DX's side being named the special ring enforcer, and Vince McMahon outright saying that he didn't want Steve as the WWF champion since his current image would be a corporate nightmare. The two had a good match that easily could have been in the all-timer category. Austin said, "We didn't get the chance to pull out all the stops. I didn't get the best of Shawn Michaels, and he didn't get the best of me." He also added that the two barely talked. As we all know, Shawn Michaels had that confrontational nature, and since he knew this was it for him, he saw putting over Stone Cold as the ultimate sign of respect, and he didn't want to work anything else out. Triple H went room to room for them to cobble this thing together, and when you listen to people giving their testimonies on the physical and psychological state of Shawn at this point, it really gives you an appreciation for the second prime he had. Michaels told Triple H at one point he wishes he would have taken so many pills that it would have killed him, that would have made him the biggest star of all time. When Austin became the guy, the feeling for Shawn was, how could this happen to him? This was supposed to be his era. He was the guy who was under insurmountable pressure and meeting it however he knew, including with a horrible drug and alcohol problem. Why did this have to happen to him? This led to him spiraling downwards even more. 33 years old, and it was all taken away from him just like that. His life was spiraling out of control. The one thing he loved more than anything he was no longer able to do, and now he was even starting to lose those that were closest to him. On the night where Vince McMahon announced the purchase of WCW, Shawn and Triple H had a falling out backstage where HBK went on a rant about how the game didn't come to his defense after he walked into a room with some big WWE stars completely being unprofessional. The Heartbreak Kid's kid changed his life and helped him clean up. He found God, he found himself, and he found the hunger to go at it one more time and get closure on his career. After 4 years away came the in-ring return. SummerSlam 2002. Unsanctioned street fight against the only man he'd trust to be in there with him. A one-off appearance then turned into a second prime and then started a new run of excellence. As far as WrestleMania goes, it was a mirror clash against Y2J Chris Jericho. The story of the idolizer passing the idol, getting overzealous and needing to win to prove that he was better. A wrestler who came face to face with his childhood idol, now thinking he surpassed everything the original did in his time. On the night after HBK lost the World Heavyweight Championship, Chris Jericho came out and told him that those three letters now stood for has-been kid. That Shawn was now essentially Shaq in a Celtics jersey. That Michaels was the reason he became a wrestler, and the old Shawn by any means would have found a way to keep that championship. These two got such a positive reaction that the decision was made to run this as a WrestleMania match. Originally it was going to be Edge and Jericho because Shawn wasn't factored in. Michaels played mind games with Jericho, luring him into taking the #1 spot at the Rumble. After all, if he was Shawn 2.0, then he needed to prove it. Shawn took #1 himself, and Jericho ran the fake out with Christian at #2, sending Michaels packing, but he got even later in the Rumble, and Chris was a pure savage in all of this. You wanted to see this guy get beat up. That's how well these two meshed together. Eventually the challenge was laid out by Jericho, and it was on. The WrestleMania return of the Heartbreak Kid. For the first time in 4 years, the same guy Jericho patterned himself after. Was he truly the same guy? Was he truly still the showstopper? Or was he replaced by the highlight of the night? Safeco Field, WrestleMania 19. On a show that was stacked with top tier matches, this one lived up to the hype and then some. Both guys had their dancing shoes on and the story was simple. On the other side, it's a reflection of yourself. Counter for counter, hold for hold, finisher for finisher, mannerism for mannerism, hammering home that these two were that close. So much so that Shawn took the win by the skin of his teeth with a roll-up. I also just wanted to add how these two men's attire perfectly contrasts one another. Jericho has gone on record to say that this is his favorite WrestleMania match, while Shawn here got a taste and wanted more. He knew he could do this full time again, and come the next year, a match with Triple H at WrestleMania 20 made a lot of sense. After all, this was a series that had been going on. The animosity was there, the history was there, and in their last man standing match at Royal Rumble 2004, it was a draw with no definitive winner. I'm Bart, I'll say the line, Error 404. He won the Royal Rumble that year. He was a SmackDown superstar and had been denied future title shots by Paul Heyman, so it looked like it was going to be Shawn and Triple H, but Benoit instead went to Raw and chose the game. The story from his end was that he'd been waiting for that big break. He was the underdog who scratched and clawed his way against the odds, that Chris was always the runner-up, always second place, always the bridesmaid, and according to Ric Flair, he kept letting go of the brass ring, and history will repeat itself at WrestleMania 20. Shawn was told by Stone Cold if he wanted in on the world title match to do something about it, and clearly Rhea Ripley and John Cena watched this tape back because before they did it, Shawn did it. He signed the contract and it was official. All these guys got their chance to shine, and there were so many false finishes, so many desperation plays. Triple H tapped out and Benoit definitively got the win. When we talk about triple threats, here's the common culprits within the WWE, but this one might be the best of the bunch, and it sucks because it's been erased from existence. Shawn played a huge part in making this match what it was, the greatest main event that never happened. I started to wonder in hindsight, because of everything that's happened, what a one-on-one Michaels Triple H match would have looked like, especially since they just had a last man standing match. How do you progress next? Would it be a 3 stages of hell? Would it be something bigger? They already destroyed one another in every other way, so it's a huge what if. Just like what if Eddie Guerrero wrestled Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 22 instead of Vince McMahon. This was the plan for 2006, and you just know all these years later, if this happened, I'd be sitting here telling you about a masterclass in storytelling, and this run that HBK had might be seen as even better. You already know Shawn and Eddie would have melted the ring with how legendary that bout would have been. Wherever you look in this WrestleMania resume, it's classics, and we got another one. WrestleMania 21, Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle. Two of the most elite tacticians in every category you can name, and the way WWE pulled this off was perfect. You have the gravity of a dream match happening on the grandest stage. Both guys need to walk in as sharp as they've ever been. Both guys have to win by any means necessary because the guy on the other side truly has a case that they're better than them. This build hit really well on the competitive aspect, Kurt Angle becoming a lunatic obsessed with wanting to show that anything Shawn did, he could do it better, and despite the noise, he hated that ever since he's been in the WWE, all anyone ever talks about is this other guy, when in his heart of hearts, he knew that he was the best wrestler to ever live. For the first time in his career, Shawn referred to himself as Mr. WrestleMania, telling Angle that everyone's best shot wasn't enough when he took to that stage, that there was no performer who could keep up with him. It was all about being better. Styles make fights, and these two's was a recipe for not just a top tier WrestleMania match, but one for the history books. A match so good that describing it on YouTube would be a disservice to the art. Even though he lost, it was Shawn's idea to have Angle go over via tap out. Really chew on that for a second. A guy with the reputation for not wanting to lose spoke into existence, hey, you should make me tap out. We're gonna put on a clinic so you end up looking strong. If you have not, and I know you guys have, you need to watch this match. No blow for blow breakdown can bring this one justice. It's so good, and I said it in the 2005 video, when you have a dream match like this, it's very easy to stand on the letdown side. It's happened time after time after time. This next one might be a sleeper hit and really proves the old adage true that some guys can wrestle a broomstick to a good match. Shawn Michaels versus Vince McMahon in a rivalry that was unbelievably petty and a humiliation ritual against Shawn Michaels. Years after the Montreal Screwjob, Vince wanted to give his thoughts on the Bret Hart DVD, and he wanted Shawn to tell the fans all about how they screwed Bret. Michaels said he'd do it again, but Vince needs to move on. That's all he told him. Move on. And this guy, because of that one line, gave a whole new meaning to petty and made Shawn public enemy number one. He banned his sweet chin music, put him in at number 1 in the Elimination Chamber match, made him team with enemies, put his WWE contract and Royal Rumble spot on the line, and we've seen a lot of these machine versus superstar stories in WWE history, but this one is different in that it's not necessarily an underdog story, it's just the boss abusing his powers to the fullest. It's the boss asserting his dominance against the employee that he wants to quit. Vince tells Shawn to remember who he was. Remember the fun he had all those years back. He says he's ready to do it again himself, and he wants that old party animal, pill popper, pre-God Michaels to make a comeback. Shane eventually screwed him out of the Rumble, then they took him out of an 8-man Road to WrestleMania tournament, forcing Shawn to sign his resignation papers, bringing in lawyers to make things official, but he didn't do this. He rips them up, and Vince says that right there opened the gates to his own personal hell. To spite him more, first Shawn's in a handicap match against the Spirit Squad, then his old buddy Marty Jannetty is brought in for the second of back-to-back WrestleMania builds, this time to join Vince's Kiss My Ass Club. Pretty spiteful overall, but hang in there, it gets even pettier. A pregnant Stephanie McMahon approaches Shawn backstage to make amends and say sorry for what's happening, but when she gets a cramp, Shawn leaves to find help and she spikes his water. But wait, it gets worse. So Shawn can't move in this match, so much so that he loses to Shane and Vince back to back. The final FU to Shawn was a public urine test, assuming that he was on substances and not the Christian he proclaimed to be. I ran through this one pretty quick, but there's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of stuff that came after this as well, you know, teaming up with God and all that. Look, you have to take into account that Vince McMahon was 60 years old at this point, and his athletic ability, well, let's just say this is the guy who tore both quads on his way down to the ring. This was not going to be a traditional match because it couldn't be. The heavy lifting needed to be done by HBK. The one thing that really helped masquerade this was it being a no-holds-barred match, and McMahon being completely open arms and ready to take whatever bump he needed. Run-ins and weapon spots make this one a blast to watch. Shawn pulls out this 12-foot ladder and hits an elbow through a trash can placed over Vince while he lays on a table. Off the top, I talked about the range, and you really see it here. At 40 years old, having a fun match against a 61-year-old, you gotta step back and just give your props. Chicago got to see Triple H and John Cena main event this show, something that was supposed to be repeated the following year, but because of a quad injury, the King of Kings had to miss the show of shows. No better replacement than his best friend. At the 2007 Royal Rumble, the final two in their home state were Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. The dead man won the right to face whatever champion he wanted, and the person he wanted to take to hell was Batista. That left the WWE Championship wide open, and Michaels won a triple threat to become the #1 contender. Cena and Michaels also held the Tag Team Championship, and it was the old will he won't he. When does Shawn finally turn his back on his partner? They just kept teasing it and teasing it and teasing it to the point where Cena was psychologically drained, thinking that it could happen at any moment, leading to HBK asking, why is no one talking about Cena turning on him? Their bond was put to the test by putting their tag team championships up for grabs in a tag team title gauntlet, and JBL added fuel to the fire, asking for the old Michaels to make a return. This matchup felt very fresh with the drama throughout and a perfect placement of moments. How they built up to the finishers was well done. They didn't dilute them in any way because the message was both guys were chipping away at each other, and it was the fight for that one final blow. That one blow that could be the winner. For Cena, it was the STF that brought him the win. And there were also rumors that Shawn was angry at John because he didn't sell the knee for enough time. He didn't go for the handshake that was supposed to happen at the top of the ramp. There's also a point in this match where Michaels gets in his face and starts cutting a promo. What was also happening behind the scenes was a tough decision. A decision that Vince McMahon made for Ric Flair because he wouldn't. He informed him that he knew he'd do this forever if he could, but it was time to build to his retirement match. Reality meshed with fiction in this one, and Triple H has said that Vince described this as why a jockey was put on a racehorse. Somebody's gotta pull the reins or they'll run until they die. It's his job to pull the reins. Flair didn't want things to come to an end after a storybook career, championship reigns that the company doesn't even recognize, styling and profiling all around the world, but he had to face Father Time head on, and it was time to bow out gracefully. There's great documentary footage out there about how broken Flair was at this point heading into WrestleMania in Orlando. He truly didn't want to retire, but he knew if he didn't, it wasn't going to go well for him. McMahon came out and he made the stipulation official. If Ric Flair loses a singles match, anyone in any way, his WWE career ends with it. But he kept hanging in there, and just when you thought it was over, he hung in there. Shawn Michaels came out to announce that the Nature Boy was going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2008. These two crossed paths, with Flair asking to go one-on-one with Mr. WrestleMania himself. Over the last stretch of Shawn's run, he does a really good job at hammering home what he's thinking so the audience understands. Here you can see he respects Flair because he truly is his idol, so he wants the match, but he doesn't want to be known as the guy who ended the greatest career of all time. Rick takes this the wrong way, thinking that Michaels has assumed a result that hasn't happened yet. After some convincing, it's a yes, but he backpedals again before the match is back on the table. What Flair hates in all of this is the pity party. He hates that Shawn keeps trying to help him. He doesn't like his catchphrases being repeated and thrown at him, and he brings out the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, running down the list of all the guys he's beat, saying if Shawn was a little older, he'd also be on that list. He needs it. He needs one more night. But then Michaels tells the tale of Old Yeller, that they loved that dog, but when it came time, they took him out back and finished him. Come Sunday, the showstopper's gonna take you, Old Yeller, behind the woodshed and put you out of your misery. This sets Flair off the deep end, and he tells Shawn to do it now. WrestleMania 24 might be the most emotional wrestling match in WWE history. Both of them were able to wind back the clock and take you on a roller coaster ride from the home of Universal Studios. At one point, Michaels is reluctant to pull the trigger, which almost causes him to lose. The ending death blow is what's fondly remembered. With Ric Flair stirring, hands braced, ready to square up again, Shawn looks at his idol, refusing to say die, fighting with all he has left, and he says, "I'm sorry, I love you." Hits a third sweet chin music, and he ends it. That's it for the career of the Nature Boy. Flair breaks down after this, soaking in the moment, saying goodbye, and that's it. The theatrics from Shawn weren't scripted. It was something he did in the spur of the moment, and I think my appreciation grows when I hear something like that. The silence and delivery created not just a WrestleMania moment, but a WrestleMania movie, if you will. Creating a story out of Ric Flair going well past his best buy date was dynamite. What might be even better is the meeting of two guys who legitimately have a claim to the Mr. WrestleMania tagline: the magical, the mythical, and the unbeatable. Picture this, it's two guys in any profession coming one-on-one. They both excel to a level far superior to any of their peers at this one event. One man is known as the guy who can take anyone's best shot and deliver a performance for the ages. The other man has dominated WrestleMania through sheer numbers and an unbeatable streak. That's something you actually get once in a lifetime. Guys with so much history behind them now meeting mano a mano. Light versus dark, heaven versus hell, good versus evil, dead versus reborn. It's beautiful how things work out sometimes. 2 years before this, Shawn and Undertaker were the final two in the Rumble, and both of them went on to face the faces of this generation. The next year, they started the Rumble at 1 and 2, with Michaels getting revenge from the previous year. And it was also a matchup between these two that was one of the reasons why Shawn even had a second prime. In storyline, Michaels had fallen on hard times, not knowing that they breed better men. He told fans that the economy had hit everyone hard, his injuries were building up, and that he had made some poor financial decisions. Because of this, he took up JBL's offer of a 1-year general employment contract to keep his family afloat, and that if he didn't, he'd become a wrestling tragedy. Undertaker eventually told Shawn it's hell trying to get to heaven. Once Shawn got out of his contract with JBL, HBK was a free man. Both of them wanted a shot at The Undertaker, and after beating Kozlov and JBL, Michaels had his shot secured. He said he didn't fear the dead man and streaks are made to be broken, with Undertaker adding that Shawn should be concerned with what he's going to do to him physically and mentally. This line works really well knowing that we got 2 matches. Even though Drew was supposed to challenge the streak in 2010, they both tried to one-up each other, with Shawn going to a graveyard and showing his opponent a tombstone that read 16-1, and that it was time for the streak to rest in peace. At one point, Shawn mimics Undertaker by dressing in all white and talking about how similar both men's careers are. Then on Raw, reminding him that he's never beaten him, that every single time in the past few weeks, he's gotten the best of him, that he's in his head. The heaven and hell elements were played into with both guys' entrances. Shawn descends from the rafters in all white, while Undertaker rises up from the stage in all black. In video form, just like Kurt and Shawn, you'll never be able to appreciate how good this is, because it's just not possible. This isn't just one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time, it's one of the greatest matches of all time, full stop. It's a masterpiece, from the entrances to the little intricacies in the match, the game of cat and mouse, the divide in the audience, the near falls, the stylistic differences, and the fact that it was one mistake that brought Shawn to his demise. One critical mistake led to Shawn losing. A moonsault caught into a tombstone piledriver, and that spelt 17-0 for The Undertaker. A match that rightfully won Match of the Year in 2009, but when Shawn went to accept the Slammy, he told him he knew he could beat him. That Slammy win was a win, but it was symbolism of a job unfinished, and the challenge was laid out. Undertaker's answer was no. He had nothing left to prove to Shawn. Then HBK made the decision. He has to earn it. He'll win the Rumble and he'll get his rematch, and this time it won't just be the streak on the line, but also the World Heavyweight Championship. But that also wouldn't be, and he sold losing this like death. The only thing that mattered was getting to The Undertaker and getting a shot at redemption. Deadpan, chasing one thing and one thing only, refusing to let it be, refusing to listen to the universe, kicking general managers in the face because they wouldn't trade for him. Not even his best friend could get through his thick skull. Then came the Elimination Chamber. With Undertaker's world title on the line, Shawn spawned from under the pod and kicked him square in the face, costing him the title. Reverse engineering the whole situation, making him so mad that he had to exact revenge. But it came with a caveat: the career of Shawn Michaels, which Michaels answered with, "If I can't beat you at WrestleMania, I have no career." In the coming weeks, the challenger hammered home the word fear, that the streak would die, and for the first time in forever, there was fear in the dead man's eyes. He was unfulfilled, having done everything in the business, but it was that one loss that tore him apart. He also knew that Undertaker was that close to losing. Eventually, he told The Undertaker that he's coming to end the streak, but not at WrestleMania. The Rock then showed up to take Shawn's spot. That didn't happen. This video was getting way too serious for a second. So here it is, the finale, WrestleMania 26. Two guys who were in their mid-40s last year just had a career-defining performance. This year they were going to go at it again with amplified stakes and in the main event. Yet again, it was another well laid out match. Is it as good as 25? You can make that judgment yourself. Both guys threw out their best shot, and Undertaker eventually had pity for Shawn just like he did for Flair. But then the defiance kicked in, that recurring throat slash and refusal to say die. A tombstone later, and the career of the Heartbreak Kid was over. On the stage he dominated for years, the place where he had classics, the place where he made a career for himself. He had one last bullet in the chamber, and that one came back to hit him square in the face. One final salute from the crowd for an all-time great, and he tells everyone, "Thank you for a wonderful life." The epilogue to his WrestleMania career came 2 years later in the End of an Era match. Yeah, I know it's not an in-ring contest for Shawn, but as much as anything else, his choice hanging in the balance is one of the biggest storyline threads. It really wraps up this 4-year saga because he's stuck in between a rock and a hard place. Undertaker earned his respect and retired him. He now understood the weight of the streak and the depths he'd go to keep hold of it. Would he corrupt his morals to stick it to the guy who was the reason he couldn't do it anymore, or would he stick it to his best friend after all they've gone through? His involvement made the match all the more interesting because of all the dynamics and everything tying in perfectly, but at the end of the day, it wouldn't be, and the streak lived on. And that was it for Mr. WrestleMania, someone who had an unmatched level of excellence across 4 decades. From 1989 to 2010, he walked onto the grandest stage and even in his most underappreciated matches, delivered. Shawn became a god at WrestleMania, and his resume is one of the reasons for the show being where it's at. More often than not, he was stealing the show with the best match on the card. Consistency, quality, longevity, moments, and once he walked off his playground for the final time, there's been no one to match him since. No matter the era, no matter the wrestler, there will truly always be 1. Mr. WrestleMania.